And it's 10 o'clock. I guess we should start. 24b. Uh, we are we are learning um, about the uh, the Gemara here was talking about Reb Meir was very against using an animal for many things. Uh, Against it, he says it doesn't work. You can't use an animal for a sukkah, for a mavoi, all different types of laws. And the Gemara got stuck with the reason of Reb Meir because we thought we knew the two reasons. We had two options of the reasons where Reb Meir was not satisfied with an animal being used as a mechitza. We thought we had it clear, but then we realized there's a problem because how does Reb Meir deal with a animal used as a goylo? Goylo has to do with a grave, and the animal would be used some type of cover to the grave, cover to the cave, a cover to the coffin, maybe a monument on top of the grave, whatever the goylol is. Different opinions as to what goylol is, but Reb Meir says that it's not tamei, it's not impure, and we know there's a famous law that goylol is impure, that there's some type of limud, a way of learning it from the Torah, that the goylol has an impurity, and according to the reasoning of Reb Meir that we were aware of, his reasoning wouldn't seem to fit when it comes to a biblical law that says it's impure. Reb Meir would not be able to come along and say, "Oh, rabbinically, it's not a problem. Rabbinically, it's not a mechitza, therefore it's pure." You can't do that. The Torah says it's impure, and the rabbinic law is very good to make an extra decree, but it's not good to remove. It doesn't work to remove a law. It can work to add on extra stringencies, to be careful, to protect the Torah, but not to remove the law of the Torah. So that's a problem the Gemara got stuck with it, and then it said it must be that Reb Meir's reason is different. And so what was the Reb Meir's reason? Gemara said that the reason of Reb Meir was because of um, a machitza that stands because of ruach, because of air. That's not called a machitza. An animal is a machitza that stands because of air. Or another way of understanding Reb Meir's law was a different point, similar, that it's a machitza that's not made by man. It's not a machitza, it's not a wall. So we have two new understandings of what the problem with an animal, using an animal as a machitza, is, either because it's standing because of air, so it's not significant, no substance to it, or because it's a mechitza that was not made by man. An animal is not made, and man can't make an animal. And therefore, it would be considered not a mechitza, not a wall. Yes, Victor.
So what about in times of sakana that sometimes even a Torah law, the rabbinic law can sometimes push things aside and say that it's a time of distress. It's like in other words, in Europe, when it was very hard to keep Yashan, I think the rabbis were lenient, saying, well, we'll forgo because otherwise people are going to starve to death. Um, so sometimes are there cases like that?
So the case of starving to death, if that's true, if that was an issue, that would be, you don't need the rabbis to come out with a permit. That would be automatically permitted, anything that's life and death. I think what you're referring to is the has palter, bread from a baker, that not everyone is makbid, is careful to have
Uh,
bread baked by a Jew. There's a leniency that you could have bread baked by a baker in places where you can't get bread, and it's, you need bread as a staple food to live. So it wasn't exactly like people are gonna die, but uh, it was there's a leniency that palter bread from a baker that's not Jewish would be permissible. Now it says, of
Mhm.
course, the Seres Yimei Tshuva, in the 10 days of between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, people should be machmir. But otherwise, if you live in a place where you can't get bread that's baked by a Jew, it's called Pas Yisrael, so you could be lenient. Um, now
I thought I really actually I was referring to Yashan. So
the
Yashan,
Yashan. Now
yeah,
Yashan is another story. So one second.
right.
So with bread,
Yashan,
what is the obligation of Pas Yisrael? It's a rabbinic law in the first place. So it's a rabbinic law in the first place, and the question is if it either was well, it didn't take effect because it was too hard for the community to take effect, so it never really. But it's not a biblical law, Pas Yisrael. So to begin with, you're not dealing with a biblical law. Now, when you're talking about Yashan, so Yashan itself is there's a whole question as to if it applies. That there seems to be some leniency that it doesn't apply outside of Eretz Yisrael, maybe, or it doesn't apply in the time of Golos. It doesn't apply now. There's definitely leniency. There's opinions of leniency with Yashan. So of course it's very nice that some people are very machmir, but we know that I mean you could just it's not that the rabbis permitted Yashan. It's that the law of Yashan is connected to the korban, the sacrifice that was brought, called the korban ha'omer. The sacrifice is called the omer sacrifice. And once that sacrifice was brought, that permitted the previous year's flour to be used. And nowadays we don't bring that sacrifice. And so
Hey,
there's
quickly,
opinions.
I'm in
There's
my
opinion
class now that's over at 11.
there's opinions to that say you still have to be machmir, but the world is more lenient. But lately, of course, the yeshivish world seems to have taken on the extra stringency to follow the more strict views. Again, it's not that the rabbis permitted it; it's that there are lenient views of keeping yashan today, meaning that is there an obligation or not is an argument. If there is an obligation, is an argument. So the common custom was to be lenient, but not that the rabbis permitted a biblical law. It's that we don't have to we don't have to be machmir. Um, there are lenient views. So anyway, I always say also you have to be careful. The the more machmer people who keep yashan, they also have to check the flour a little better, because if you keep flour a long time, sometimes you do find bugs in it. So it's
yeah.
but anyway, it's definitely a nice chumrah to keep. I'm not minimizing it. It's but it's not. I can't say it's
Well,
the accepted chumrah. It's not like such a accepted thing. Of course, in all the frum communities, you have people who want it. So like they'll make everyone happy. They want business from everyone. They'll get yashan. But to say that it's you can't say that the rabbis permitted it. It's yeah. Okay, so in any event,
right, thank you.
no problem. So in any event, so here we have the law of the mayor's reason for his law that an animal can't serve as a goylel. So we have, which also explains why an animal isn't good for a wall for a eruv or a wall for a sukkah. So these two reasons seem to be the understanding of the Gemara, the final understanding of the Gemara, why Reb Meir would hold what he holds. So the Gemara says, so what's the difference between these two reasons that we just mentioned? And it was Rav Acha Bar Yaakov who said these reasons. Some say he said one of them, some say he said the other one. But these two reasons, what's the difference between them? The Gemara says the difference would be that if you placed your sukkah leaning on top of a vessel that's filled with air, some type of a blow up noid, a wineskin that's blown up. So according to the opinion that any wall that's standing because of air, that is not considered a machitza is not considered a wall. So um, if that's true, then this would be invalid because it's standing. It's being supported by this air bubble, this wineskin that's filled with air. According to the opinion that a machitza is not valid, it's not made by man. This is made by man because it is blown up by man. And I believe we turned the page to and that's where we're up to. No, we actually went further. I'm sorry, we went further. We spoke about Gittin yesterday. So so that was the answer to this. That was the explanation, the final explanation of Reb Meir's opinion about the animal. Okay, then we went further and we spoke about Gittin, and we had that Rabbi Yossi HaGalili said that they said in the name of Rabbi Yossi HaGalili that you're not allowed to use an animal for a get, for a divorce. In those days, they didn't have Staples or Home Depot, Office Depot. They had paper and things like that, or parchment. They would just have an animal. They would write on it. They would put their notes. They didn't have. So the thing is, person could think. At least the rabbis hold you're allowed to write a get on an animal. Rabbi Yossi HaGalili says no, you can't write it on top of an animal. What's the reason? So he says because it says the word sefer, and he learns that it says sefer, and it also says kosavla. So you say that it has to be, you could write on anything similar to a sefer, similar to parchment, basically anything that's not alive, and anything that's not a food. Right, that was his two rules, two qualifications for a kosher get. Has to be something that's not alive, so it has to be similar to a cloth, to a parchment. Parchment isn't alive, and it has to be not a food similar to parchment. Parchment is not edible. So that was Rabbi Yossi HaGalili's view, and the rabbis argued on it. And the Gemara asked, "What do the rabbis do?" It seems like he has a good point, and it says sefer, and it says kosavla, have a cloud. The Gemara used the understanding of Rabbi Yossi HaGalili was you have a klal and a prat, and the way Tosfos understands it is it's a klal, a prat, a klal, and therefore you can include many things, and you exclude you exclude a few things. So that's how that's the understanding in Rabbi Yossi HaGalili. What do the rabbis learn? The rabbis say that it's not a klal prat because it's not telling you to write it in a sefer. There's no prat. There's no specific. Klal prat means this. Sometimes the Torah uses a general rule and then a specific rule, and sometimes the Torah then goes back and gives more general. And when it does that, sometimes it's telling you that you have to use this specific rule case, or sometimes it's saying anything similar to the specific case. And there's the code of there's a code to decipher the meaning of the Torah based on when the Torah gives examples. And so that's the case here, where the Torah gives an example. Does that mean similar examples? Does it mean only this example? So you have to write it in a sefer. You have to write on a cloth. Does a divorce, does that mean it has to be on the cloth? Does it mean anything similar to a cloth? Could it be anything? Could you write it on anything? Is it just giving an example and it doesn't really mean to limit it at all? So that's the that you have to follow the rules that the Torah is deciphered, the code of deciphering the Torah, and that is how Rabbi Yossi HaGalili sees these words that it's a general law, and then it gives a specific, and then it's a general. Now we have the rabbis that argue. What do the rabbis say? That it doesn't mean to tell you you have to write it in parchment. It means you have to write it. It means that because of law, not safer, not in a parchment, because of law, you write it, the story. You write that he's divorcing her. The sefer devarim. In other words, it doesn't mean from the word safer, like the parchment, the book. It means the sefer devarim that you write in the sefer. You write about the what he's doing, what he's about to do. He's divorcing her. He's letting her be free to marry whoever she wants. Hareyat muteres l'chol adam. That's the main part of the get, and that's what he's doing. So that's the rabbi's answer to Rabbi Yossi Haglili, that it's not a klal uprat. This is not a case where you have where the Torah gives an example of what to write it in. It's just saying what you write. Okay, and then the Gemara, and that's I believe what we got up to, because it doesn't say ba sefer, it says sefer, and it means sfiras devarim be'alma hudas. So we are holding maybe 10 lines from the top of the page. Ten lines from the top of the page. Okay. And we're up to V'Rabbanan. No, we're up to, yeah. V'Rabbanan, Hai V'Kosav, my Darshibe. So we're in 24b, 10 lines from the top of the page. V'Rabbanan, Hai V'Kosav, my Darshibe. What did the rabbis do with the fact that the Torah says V'Kosav? The Torah says that the way the rabbis are learning, that sefer does not mean parchment, means that he writes what's going on now. In other words, he's that about the divorcing, about what he's accomplishing. So why does the Torah say v'kosav, which implies like he could write it on anything? Why does the Torah even have to say that? It really could have just left it out. So my Darshibe, what do they learn from the fact that it says v'kosav? So the Gemara says you needed to say v'kosav because otherwise you might think that you could get divorced with money. You need it to say that he has to divorce her by writing, because otherwise you would think that you could divorce the same way you got married with money, you could get divorced with money. Salka daitoch amina, it would go up in my mind, in your mind. Salka daitoch, it would go up in your mind, amina, to say, hoyel ve'iskesh yitzia lahavoya, since it says in Kiseitse that the man is divorcing his wife, it says she will leave his house and she will go and marry another man. And because it says it right next to each other, she leaves his house and she goes and marries another man. She becomes married to another man. So the Torah compares and connects the leaving to the going, the leaving Yitzia lahavoya, the leaving one man to the becoming married to another man. So it uses those two words, yotza and haisa. And the haisa refers to marriage, and yotza refers to divorce, and it says it right next to each other. So the Gemara says you would think that there's some similarity there because the Torah puts them and connects them, juxtaposes them together. Mahavaya bekesef af yitzia bekesef, just like the way to marry the next man is with money, that the man gives her money. So also the leaving, the marriage, you would think could also be done with money. Kamash malon, this comes and lets us hear that the way to dissolve a marriage is not with money. Now, what does it mean that you would dissolve the marriage with money? Who would give who money? Would the man give the woman money to dissolve the marriage? What's the Gemara's thought? What was the Gemara thinking? So you would think if a marriage is a man gives a woman money or ring, so the divorce would also be a money, some type of monetary action that someone would give someone, but who would give who, and that would dissolve the marriage. So Rashi says that the man would give the woman money and say, Hare at megureshes, boy, you are divorced with this money. Similar to how he gave the money for Kiddushin, and he said, you are mekudeshes with this money. So now he's saying, you are megureshes with this money. So that's the way Rashi understands it. The Sfas Emes says, I would think that the Gemara might mean the opposite, that the woman is giving the man money. That's his logic. Maybe she should give, and I guess the logic of the Sfas Emes is that it would be like dissolving the marriage. And in a certain sense, a divorce is, I mean, it's not going retroactively. There was a marriage there. But the fact is, if marriage is the man gives the wife money, so he says, I could see it the other way, that Rashi learns this way. So, this is the way Rashi learns. Sfas Emes, who's a much later commentary, just asks more like, it would seem like you could maybe understand it the other way, that maybe the woman would give the man money, and that would be the divorce. And his comparison would be to an eved, a slave. How does an eved go free? She's not an eved, right? But he compares that there's a document of the document of freedom that an eved has is sort of like a divorce. There's a similarity there, but of course a woman's not an eved, chas v'shalom. But
he has a ksuba that he has to pay off.
Right, but this would not be fulfilling the obligation of the ksuba, unless that's the way you want to learn this. That he would hand the ksuba money. Is that the way you understood it? That he would hand the ksuba money to her and say, "With this, you are divorced." The ksuba first. I mean, that's an interesting thought. That may be that's the understanding here. That he's giving the money of the ksuba, and he says.
I know that Rashi didn't say it, but that would stand to reason, because there is a document that exists that
right.
And that document is the thing that keeps the two of them together.
Oh, that's an interesting shot. Okay, yeah, it sounds good, actually. Okay, very nice. Yeah, that would be an interesting understanding here. So he gives her the money that he's obligated to. In any event, the Gemara is only in the thought process, and it's a work in progress. This is not the final conclusion. The final conclusion is you cannot get divorced with money. Divorce is either through a get, a divorce document, or death. But other than that, there isn't a way out of a divorce and a way out of marriage. So the Gemara said we could have thought that it could be with money, and the answer is that it's that it's v'kosav, that it has to be something written. That's how the marriage is and ends through v'kosav. He has to write something. So the Gemara says that the rabbis use v'kosav to darshan that it has to be b'chsiva miskareshes. She's divorced with writing now, and not with money. Rabbi Yosi Haglili. So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yosi Haglili, hi svarim and ole. How does Rabbi Yosi Haglili learn? How does he know this? Because he uses v'kosav to tell you that you could write on almost anything. He has teaching that he's got some type of a limud, a teaching that he learns from the word v'kasav. So he doesn't use it like the rabbis use it to tell you that it has to be written. And so he's using v'kasav to tell you could write it on anything. So how do you know that it's not money is not an option to use as a divorce? So the Gemara says, "Misefer krisos nafkale," because it says sefer krisos, and because it says sefer krisos, and it says krisos next to the word sefer, so therefore he says sefer karsa ve'ein davar acher karsa. He says sefer is what divorces and separates them, and nothing else. In other words, he uses the fact that it says sefer and krisos next to each other, that it proves that it has to be a sefer is what divorces them, and you can't use money. Now, v'idach, what do the rabbis do with that? V'idach ahumi boyle, the rabbis, what do they do with the fact that it says krisos right next to the word sefer? And so they learn the davar hakoires beinoi leveino, that the divorce has to be something that is separating them and not attaching. There shouldn't be any attachment still, no string still attached. And this divorce has to be something that fully cuts them apart. The Tanya, as it was taught in a brisa, Harei ze gite almanas shalei. This is your divorce. If he tells her, this is your divorce on the condition that you don't drink wine, and on the condition that you never go to your father's house forever. Ein ze krisos. This is not called a separation. Why? Because she's always going to be limited where she can go. She can't go here. She can't drink wine. She has a limitation on what she's allowed to do and what she's not. And that limitation is based on what? Based on her ex-husband. He is telling her, or the question is if he's an ex-husband or a current husband. The Gemara is telling us that that type of divorce is not a real divorce because he's not really an ex. He really is still married to her because she's still limited based on his condition. And so the Gemara says that would not be considered a divorce. It has to be a krisos, a proper divorce. Here, for the rest of her life, she's never allowed to go to her father's house. She's never allowed to go to her to drink wine. This is not considered. She's always going to be tied down because of this husband of hers that is trying to divorce her, but he's keeping his strings attached to her, and that's not called a krisos. And so the Gemara says, Kol shloishim yoim. What happens if the husband divorces her, and he makes a condition, and the condition is this is a divorce on the condition that you don't go to your father's house all 30 days, or on the condition you don't drink wine for 30 days. So then the Gemara, the Brisa says, Harei ze krisos, that is considered a divorce, and because she could not go for that amount of time, and at the end of the 30 days there will be a solid separation between them. So because there is going to be a full separation once the divorce takes effect, so therefore we consider her to be allowed to marry someone biblically from now, even though the divorce we're not 100% sure about, because he gave it on a condition, and the condition really we need to wait a month to see, make sure that she doesn't trigger the the divorce to be null and void, and she doesn't void it. But the thing is, according to the Torah law, that's a good divorce. Why is it a good divorce? She's not really. She still has strings attached to him, because for 30 days she's not going to be allowed to go. She's not going to be able, if she wants the divorce, take effect. She can't go, so she's limited these 30 days. So why does divorce take effect immediately? So the thing is that because it will be a divorce, that is considered a good divorce. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be right now. It's a davar hakoires. This divorce, this document, is a divorce that's going to ultimately lead to a full-fledged separation. They are going to be fully disconnected. So even though now there's some type of limit on her, it's biblically it's okay. Now rabbinically, she's not allowed to get remarried. Rabbinically, and this is again a case where the rabbis were concerned. What happens if she, by mistake, she goes to her father's house? By mistake, she goes and drinks wine, or she can't control herself. She drinks wine. So what's going to happen then? It's going to be a big problem. The divorce will be nullified, and then she's going to be married to a man. Even though she's already married, she's going to be transgressing adultery, and the other man will be transgressing adultery. So rabbinically, we can't allow her to do this. But the Rashi tells us that biblically, this would actually be called a proper divorce, because it will come to a hafrada, a separation, the end of 30 days. And therefore, even now, me'achshav, from now, she is allowed to get remarried biblically. Not rabbinically, but biblically, she would be allowed to. So that's the lesson that we learn from the word, that it's a krisos, that it has to separate. So again, it's a little confusing here. We've got Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and we've got the rabbis are going back and forth and saying this rabbi learns this from that word, and that rabbi learns this, learns something else from those words. So we got to go back and forth. So here, where are we up to? And we've got Rabbi Yossi says he learns Sefer Krisos, that he can't use money. Then we said, what do the rabbis do with Sefer Krisos? That it says next to Sefer, it says the word Krisos. That the rabbis say that it has to be a full separation. That the separation of that's going to last a lifetime, that's not a separation. But if it's a separation for 30 days, that's okay. That's fine. If it's limited to a certain time, that would be okay. And that would be what the Torah means. Sefer Krisos, it has to be ultimately a full-fledged separation, even if it's not right away. And there are places where it explains this a little better, that it says whenever you say a condition and you say the words al menas on the condition, it always means me'achshav. So here also, seemingly that's the meaning over here, that when you say al menas, you mean it should take effect from now. That if you don't go to your father's house, the divorce will take effect from now. And so that's the for 30 days. If you don't go to your father's house for 30 days, the divorce will take effect from now, and therefore, biblically, she would be allowed to remarry right away. Once she gets that divorce document, she could go and remarry. Now,
Rabbi, a question.
Yes.
Okay, I know this is not the topic that the topic on Sukkah, but I mean, we're penalizing the wife because the husband is intransigent. He's making it's a finite condition, a condition that ends after a certain amount of time. So suppose that he's a Kohen and she's married to him, and he gives her a get. So why, if he makes a condition that you can't do this for 30 days, why can't we turn around and penalize him and say, okay, then you have to allow her to eat your truma for 30 days while she's not allowed to do anything else?
See, there might be methods and ways of penalizing the man. for for making things hard. Um, it's like, for example, if the woman refuses to accept the get, well, there are ways of penalizing. Now, that's not exactly not normally not done by the court. Normally, these are type of methods that this either or both spouses play this game where they're you know trying to ruin the other person's life as much as they can. Um, our Gemara is more just talking about what happens in such a scenario. Would that be a valid get? As far as I see it, whoever does such a thing is just a real nasty. These are nasty people doing things like this. They let them just move on and make a life for themselves. But this is the fact. This would be a kosher get. Now, I don't know if she needs to accept it. She could, and then he might be stuck not being able to get married until he gets a heter me'ah rabbanim. At least in today's day and age. Because the man is not allowed to marry two wives. So if she's still married, so there might be methods that she could do to manipulate things. But again, it's these are unfortunately some of the games that people play are not exactly fun for either side, and the biggest loss is to the children. The children suffer the most probably in all these cases because the children see their parents fighting like babies. But anyway, we should never know of any such things. So okay, so the Gemara concludes here and says that v'idach mikares krisos nafka. And what is Rabbi Yossi Haglili? It's a little hard to keep up with all these this back and forth. But v'idach is what is Rabbi Yossi Haglili do, and how does he know that it has to be something that's divorce has to be a full-fledged separation where there's no strings attached? He learns it from the fact that it could have said kares, and it says krisos, so you could learn two things. You could learn that the sefer has to be separate, that it has to be done with a document and not with money. And you learn the fact that it says krisos instead of kares, that it's telling you that it has to be a full-fledged separation with no strings attached. Ve'idach, and what do the rabbis do with the fact that it could have said kares and it says krisos? So the Gemara answers, ve'idach kares krisos loy darshi. They don't have a drush. They don't learn anything from kares krisos. It's that to them is not meaningful enough of a difference that it teaches us a full-fledged law, and therefore they learn it from the fact that it says sefer krisos, and it not and not from the fact that it's kares versus krisos. Just the fact that it says krisos, that already is enough to learn that you can learn one thing, you can't learn two things out of it. Yes, Victor.
I'm just curious if this is isn't it a little bit obvious that the money, there's no siman on the money? In other words, what's she gonna do? Go to some town with a piece of silver, show the rabbi, here's whatever, and I'm divorced. How's he gonna know if he can marry her again? If he
Right.
can perform kiddushin for her again? That she has to have some kind of document that
Right. So
he
the
can
thing
keep and
is,
say, Here's my document. It proves it that.
right. Good point.
So
So the thing is that you could ask the same question: what do people do when, God forbid, their spouse passes away? So they don't have if you have a divorce, you have a document.
you can get documents
What is it? What
usually.
if there's no document? It's off. So they get a death certificate. They have documents. They have the Beis Din could write a document. So the same thing here. What our Gemara is talking about is making that transaction effective. Now, to be able to prove that it happened, that you would have witnesses. You would have the witnesses could go to the court. It could be maybe this was done in front of the court, but he handed her the money. So the court could write a document. That's only to prove. But here we're dealing with what makes it effective as an effective divorce or what effective marriage, effective, what makes it that take effect. That's the either the money or the thing. And as we see in our Gemara, money won't work, but it could have. But the thought was that maybe money would work, but that wouldn't be your proof. It would be the proof would be the document that would go along with it from the court or the witnesses. That would be another proof. The witnesses you would have, and so on.
So does she have to keep this document until she gets remarried, and then she can use it to? Is that how? I don't know. I wouldn't. Baruch Hashem, we shouldn't know from such things,
Right.
but
So a divorce document, yeah, they keep, sure they keep it, and if they, I would think again, right, I'm not so familiar with these things, but yeah, I would think that they would keep the divorce document very carefully because they might need it. And but then again, there are witnesses. There is a bezdin that it was done in front of, and there must be other sources of reliable proof as well, I guess. Okay.
Rabbi
Yes.
Rabbi Lehrfield used to give a receipt,
Uh-huh.
not the document itself. Give
Uh-huh.
a receipt to the wife saying that the divorce document is residing with
With
Rabbi
me.
Lehrfield.
Uh-huh.
And if anybody required it, they could approach him and he would provide them
Uh-huh.
with
Uh-huh.
the
Oh,
information.
wow.
That
Interesting.
way it couldn't be lost
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
by accident.
Right. Right. Oh, that's interesting. I guess maybe that's the way it's commonly done. That could be. Okay. So Victor, I guess the correct answer is maybe they don't keep the document, they keep a receipt. I guess we'd have to ask Rabbanim who deal with divorces. It's a specialty field. It's not you can't just go to a rabbi of a shul and it makes the divorce. Now, even the rabbis do marriages, but they don't normally do divorces. It's a specialized field. Okay. We are now, so we're up to the Mishnah. We're up to the Mishnah. There's a whole discussion here. We'll just mention that Tosfos brings a little discussion over here when he says when the husband makes this condition about the divorce on the condition that she doesn't go to her father's house. Tosfos asks, seemingly that also is a limited rule because that type of a condition is limited to as long as her father is still alive. So seemingly that condition is also not a condition forever. Just like if a person says 30 days, when he says that it's a condition that she can't go to where she's giving the divorce on the condition that she can't go to her father's house until her father's house, that seemingly is also limited to as long as he lives. So because of that, that would seemingly be a divorce without strings attached forever. There's a limit to how long those strings are attached. So Tosfos says that when it says a father's house, it doesn't mean to visit the father. It means the house. So Tosfos wants to say that it doesn't limit it to the father. It's even if the father passes away, she would still be prohibited to go to that house, and that would be the condition that the Gemara is talking about. That would be a strings attached forever case, and would not be a divorce. The divorce would be invalid. So that's the way Tosfos answers it. Tosfos tries to prove it. He says there's a pasuk where it talks about Tamar, and Tamar was told by Yaakov Tamar was told by Yehuda that why don't you go back to your Beis Avich, to your father's house, and when Shayla gets old enough, I will, we'll be in touch. And what happened there was Tamar was married to Er and Aina too. Tamar was married to Yehuda's oldest son, and he died. Then she was married to his second to oldest son, and he died. And then Yehuda was a little nervous about this girl, this woman, because the two husbands had passed away. And so she said, why don't you go back to your father's house? Who's her father's house? So the understanding in the Midrashim is that her father was Shem the son of Noach. Now, this is many generations later. So Taisa says, you see that Beis Avich, your father's house, doesn't necessarily mean that he's still around. He passed away a long time before. Shem had passed away before this happened. And she still uses the term Beis Avich. So you see over there that that it refers to the house that her father, had resided in, even though he's passed away. So that's Tosfos's answer. That Beis Avich means the father's house, even though he's not around. Now, the problem with Tosfos, commentaries ask, they say you could really differentiate and say there's a difference. When a person tells someone a condition based on something to do with their father's house, there's a difference if the father's alive at the time the stipulation is made, or if the father passed away already at the time the stipulation is made. So they ask on Tosfos, they say, when did Yehuda tell Tamar, go back to your father's house? He had passed away already when he made the stipulation. So of course it meant the house that her father had lived in, and he's not alive, but he's just talking about the house. But when the father's alive at the time the stipulation is made, and then the father passes away, for example, in a case where a person gives a divorce, and he says to his wife that this is your divorce, you're permitted to this divorce will take effect immediately now, as long as you never go to your father's house. If the father's alive at that time, then when the father passes away, seemingly then it would be nullified, that condition. Now, if the father is not alive at the time that the stipulation is made, then what it's meant is the house that her father lived in. So it's seemingly you could differentiate and say the case of Tamar is not a proof, because in that case, he had passed away already when the words "your father's house" were stated. So since he had passed away when the words were stated, then you could say he means to say father's house. That's nothing to do with her father being alive or not alive. But in a case where the father's alive at the time stipulation is made, then seemingly it would be nullified. That condition would end when the father passes away. So that's what the question they ask on Tosfos. But they explain that, at least one of the commentaries says, the Gemara is not getting into the exact detail of how you worded it. And the point of the Gemara is that if there's a limit to the condition, if there's a limit, then it could be considered a kosher divorce. If there's no limit and it will last forever, then it's not a kosher divorce. So they come up with a way how he worded it. In a way, you could word it in a way that it's the land of the father. In other words, he didn't use the father's house, the land that was owned by the father, something along those lines. So then it doesn't matter the father's alive, he's not alive. It's always going to be forever. So that's how the commentaries answer this question, and they sort of argue on Tosfos's conclusion that if you word it Beis Avich, it means the father's house, even if the father's not alive. Not always that's not always correct according to them. Okay, so that's the end of this Gemara. The Mishnah says, So we're up to the new Mishnah on page 24b. The Mishnah says, bein ha'ilonis. The person made a sukkah between the trees. V'ha'ilonis defanes lo. And the trees are walls for the sukkah. Kishera, the sukkah is kosher. So he built the sukkah, Rashi says, on the ground. And the sukkah is not leaning on the trees. It's just that the trees are going to be the walls for the sukkah. So this is a new case. We've got sukkah that has not an animal as the wall. We got bushes or a tree. We got a tree that's the wall for that's being used as a wall. Now, why does Rashi say that it's not leaning? The sukkah is not leaning on this tree. It's just simply there as a wall, but it's not that the sukkah is leaning on it. So Rashi mentions that seemingly for two reasons. Number one, that if the schach is leaning on the tree, then you're going to have a problem that it's leaning on something that's invalid for schach. And we had a discussion about that before. Could be it's a debate between the Paiskim. If a sukkah, if the thing that holds up the schach has to be kosher for schach, and so bottom line is that it could be that's what Rashi means, that it's not leaning on the tree. The other option is that if it was leaning on the tree, then we would have a problem that you would not be able to go on Shabbos a Yontiv in this sukkah. And the Mishnah seems to just say that it's kosher. And it doesn't limit it to say, oh, on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you're not allowed to go on it. If it was leaning and supported by the tree, as we saw in the previous Mishnah, then you would have a problem to go on it on Shabbos and Yom Tov. We're going to be afraid that you're going to put your stuff on the tree, hang stuff on the tree, and that's not allowed. And ultimately, it would be a problem to go on this sukkah on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So Rashi tells us that it's not, it's just a wall. The branch, the tree is just a wall for your sukkah, and you're not using it as any support. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says that Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, which is the same Rav Acha bar Yaakov that we had on the previous page, the previous Amud. We had the Rav Acha bar Yaakov explaining Reb Meir. Here we have Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, Kol mechitza she'ena yechola lamay baruch mitzuya ena mechitza. So there he was. It's interesting. Rav Acha bar Yaakov was telling us before also about these laws of mechitza. He told us if it's a mechitza that stands because of air, then it's not a mechitza. A mechitza that stands that is not made by man is not a mechitza. And here on this page he says a mechitza that's not able to withstand a ruach mitzuya, a wind that's a usual wind. It's not a mechitza. A wall needs to be able to withstand a regular wind, the normal winds, and we've talked about that before. Now, in the past, we've talked about it that mechitza can't topple over. Here, what we're understanding is that it has to be able to withstand a wind, that it doesn't move back and forth. Not that it's toppling over, but it's not withstanding the wind, that it's being blown back and forth, and it's not staying somewhat sturdy, which really opens up a whole question about the canvas sukkahs, that the canvas, the way they built those, and I don't know if you remember them from like 30 years ago. I don't think they're as popular now. Now they have they don't use canvas, they use some other material, maybe like a plastic or something, but it's they also have loved straps. They have certain straps that make it tighter and make it, that are considered like a tight wall. But But the old canvas sukkahs was always there was always this issue where they didn't really tie well to the metal frame, and they ended up flapping back and forth. And the understanding is that you have 3 handbreadths. If it moves more than 3 handbreadths, then it's not considered a solid wall. But so there were different ways people tried to, you try to tie it down, make it tight, make it more
They would
sturdy.
they would add the lattice. You go to Home Depot, get the lattice, and put it. That's
Yeah,
that's
I don't
what
know if they used
most
to do
people.
that no 30 years ago. I think that's a later concoction that people realized. I don't remember that popular 30 years ago. I've seen it around now. People don't even put the canvas on sometimes. They just put the lattice. They use the canvas metal frame
Depends on
and then
your climate.
climate.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Right. But I don't remember 30 years ago people doing the lattice thing. I don't maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, so here we're dealing with a mechitza that is not able to withstand the regular wind. And this is Ravacha Bar Yaakov's statement about a mechitza. Now the Mishnah had said that if you make the wall, if the wall of your sukkah is a tree, that is a kosher wall. And so the Gemara asks on Ravacha Bar Yaakov, Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, and it's actually our Mishnah. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, if a person made their sukkah between the trees, and the trees are walls for the sukkah, Keshera, it is kosher. The Gemara asks, isn't the walls going and coming? Aren't the walls going and coming? They're going back and forth. There's branches of the tree. The tree is moving constantly. It's between the trees. The tree. So hacha b'mayoskinon b'kashin. The Gemara answers, we're dealing with a tree that is old and thick, and it's strong and sturdy. Kashin, it's a strong tree because it's old, and it's a very old tree, and it's a very thick tree. So we're dealing with a tree that's not flapping back and forth. The Gemara says, isn't there the branches that are going to flap back and forth? Gemara says we're dealing with a case where you actually wove it with hutza v'dafna, which are things that we spoke about previously. Hutza are the branches of a palm branches, and dafna was some other type of tree that you people were familiar with. I forget
Laurel. It translates laurel here.
How do you spell that? L-A-U
Laurel.
Ariel. Okay, a laurel tree, and
Yeah.
And so you somehow tied the branches that they're not gonna you made it in a way you wove it that they're not gonna swing back and forth. So the Gemara says, oh, so then what's the problem with the tree? Why would you think it's a problem then? If that's so, ihachi my lememra. What do you even have to tell us? You use it sounds like a solid wall. You got a tree with a trunk, that the trunk is solid. You got you have some branches that are tied down. So why would you even tell us that it's kosher? What's the Mishnah telling us? So the Gemara says, Mahu detema nigzar. You might have said that nigzar, we should make a decree. Dilma asi lishtamushe be'ilan. Maybe you're going to end up using the tree, and that would be prohibited on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. And put your vessels on the tree, and therefore kamash malan, it comes and lets us hear that this is not a problem. You're allowed to use a sturdy tree for your wall. We're not afraid that you're going to come and put your utensils on it and transgress the Shabbos and Yom Tov. And putting your hanging things on it. So comes and lets us hear that that's not a problem. We're not afraid that you're going to do that. And we're going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.